Hello, a very good afternoon to you. My name is Nokip Kimboy, and remember, years ago, that is in the year 2015, what happened is that the world came together and formed these goals, parameters that we're going to work on to make a better world for all of us. The Sustainable Development Goals were set then. And the goal number 2 was zero hunger. You know, matters to do with food. And we say by the year 2030, we'll be done with this. We will be done and dusted, won't have hunger in the world as a problem. Well, you're counting years, now it's 10 years to that particular goal. Are we on the right path? That is the question. And the answer is, well, we are not. So the question is, what is happening, especially in Kenya in our context and globally at large? What can we do to solve this problem of hunger? And the bigger discussion will revolve around food security. Well, to help us put all this conversation into detail and, give us their perspective, I'll be joined by, starting us off, Calvin Shingles, who's the country director of Welt Hunger Hilfe, WHH, and he'll be giving us more interesting details in regards to what he does. I understand he's a humanitarian and development specialist, amongst other things that he is a specialist in. But secondly, also, we'll have Professor Mary Abukutsa. Professor Mary Abukutsa is a professor of horticulture and Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research, Production and Extension at the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, popularly known as JKUAT. She's also a distinguished scientist that has conducted pioneering research in African indigenous vegetables. Talk of Murenda, Seveve, all that, she's a specialist. Some of you are not eating some of these vegetables, so we're going to have a tough talk in that regard. But we will also be joined by John Macharia, who is the country manager for Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. And also, he's been involved actually in Rockefeller Foundation on matters waste and spoilage initiative. We understand that waste is a big issue when it comes to talking food security in Africa, but also he's involved in Farm to Market Alliance, and this touches on the food ecosystem in Kenya. Well, those are our specialists today, and you understand from their profiles that they are well equipped to give us detailed information, because they are not just talking, but they're talking and walking at the same time, if you get what I mean. Well, we'll start this conversation with the prelude that the Global Hunger Index, Index 2020, was actually released yesterday. And some of the statistics are very worrying. And I'll bring in Mr. Calvin Shingles, who was actually, first-hand responsible and, involved in this particular index. Calvin, what were the details that you're looking at coming up with this Global Hunger Index?
Yes, Noah, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation by KTN to be part of this process. As you mentioned, yesterday was the 15th edition of the Global Hunger Index, and the Global Hunger Index aspires to look at long-term trends on the issue of hunger, whether that's on a global, regional or national level. And last year, our actual focus in 2019 was on hunger and climate change. And this year, we've been focusing more on linking health and sustainable food systems. The whole GHI report not only providing statistics, but also hopes to gain greater awareness on the global hunger situation. It also provides an incentive for countries to act to improve their international score. And Welt Hunger Hilfe as an organisation also provides this information in the country setting to start a conversation. And we started the conversation yesterday, and we're continuing with the conversation today. So as you've mentioned, it's only 10 years to go before we reach the sustainable SGD 2, Zero Hunger by 2030, which is very much similar to the Kenya's Vision 2030. And we'd really like to see how we're performing,
Yes.
Noah, in regard to hunger in this country.
Definitely, very important. So in that particular report, actually went through it yesterday, you look at 3 pillars. The whole report is revolving around 3 pillars which do have subtenants to them. So the issue of inadequate food supply, then we have child mortality, and this specifically touches on the mortality rate of children under the age of 5, and also we have child undernutrition, which targets on wasting and stunting. And stunting has to do with growth. So maybe you find people have not grown to their full potential, and the question is, what is happening? Maybe it's the issue of undernutrition. Well, I want to bring in Professor Abukutsa. You have been involved in research for the longest time, academia especially, and you touch on the resources that we have on the continent. Just starting from that prelude, that we have a food security situation in the country, was this the case always going back, let's say 50 years back, or is it something that has been there?
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here to discuss this very important topic. I want to say that to start with, hunger, malnutrition, and lack of food was not the situation in Africa. It shouldn't be the situation in Africa at the moment. Even as we speak, I would like to say that Africa is still the richest continent in the world. We find that many of the bioresources, natural resources, apart from South America, they are there in Africa. And during the olden days, we find that people had food. There was enough food, not only for the rich, but for the whole community, for everybody, for the young, the old, and also the vulnerable. But what happened that now the food is not there for us? At that time, we had a diversity of foods, African indigenous foods, very rich foods, resilient foods, nutritious foods. However, as we were colonized by the white people, they came to Africa and said that anything African is either backward or is evil. And then we started thinking that the white man cannot cheat us. So we abandoned our own foods. We abandoned our culture. We abandoned even our medicinal, herbal medicines that we had. So we find that because of that, we lost, or we are in the process of losing our biodiversity. So a few of us in Africa started rethinking now, what happened to our natural resources, our indigenous foods? And that's what actually interested me to look at African indigenous vegetables, among other resources.
Definitely.
And we find that if we can look at our indigenous foods, they're actually highly competitive in terms of nutrition and health benefits.
Definitely, and we shall be breaking that down because, you know, cabbages, some people think cabbages were always around. Especially bachelors, you know, have been eating lots of cabbages. I can see some in the studio here, but that's a discussion for another day. But the issue about that indigenous food, we need to break it down. Where did they go? What can we do to revive them? Some people are living in the city, they're saying, oh, I live in Nairobi, how can I do this and that? Well, we shall look at the practical solutions that you, on a personal level, can do to increase your diversity in terms of what you're eating. But right now, I want to bring in John Masharia, who's the country manager, Agro Kenya. And Agro Kenya, you focus on, you say, farm-centered, transforming smallholder farmers. Now, when we talk about food security on our continent and smallholder sort of farming, small farms in the continent. Is that a contributing factor? Because we've seen globally, people are scaling up. So you look at countries which are more secure, they tend to be more scaled up when it comes to producing their food. Is this the scale a variable when it comes to food security talk?
Thank you, Noah, for the opportunity to participate in this wonderful discussion. And indeed, as the Alliance for a Green Revolution, we believe that it is possible to drive food security not just in Kenya, for example, but in the whole of Africa by working with smallholder farmers. And a couple of numbers inform us or inform this decision. In most African countries, anywhere between 70 to 80% of the farmers or of the food that is coming to the table is actually coming from smallholder farmers, which also means close to 50 to 60% of the arable land or the resources that we have are actually in the smallholder farmers. And the question then is, how do we make those smallholder farmers more effective and more efficient in agricultural production? And this is also informed by the fact that the markets are there. I think Africa is one of the countries, the continents that actually has a growing population, which means you have more mouths to feed. Kenya, for example, we are growing at a rate of about 1 million people, per year. So by 2030, right now we are about 48 million. There's a likelihood will be another, 10 million people more. Those are 10 million people who need more food. And this food can be provided by smallholder farmers. However, we also need to understand the fact that we do have productivity constraints because, and like most African countries, farmers do not, go to school to get into agriculture. A lot of this is by inheritance. So there's need to to have farmers access better extension services that give them the knowledge and also help them access technologies that help them improve their yields. But when I talk about yields, I'm talking in hindsight that in Kenya, I think the average yield for maize right now is about anywhere between 1,500 kilos to 2 tons. But if you look at other developed countries, we are getting yields as high as 15 tons per hectare. And that means that those farmers are having water use efficiencies, they're having nutrient efficient technologies that they're adopting such that they're getting more volume or more yields per unit of resource that they have been able to apply. The second thing that is important to understand for smallholder farmers is, the level of poverty is also quite stringent among smallholder farmers. So having interventions that proactively help smallholder farmers access finance is vitally important. And it's not finance for the sake of finance. It's finance for the sake of them accessing inputs, having structured markets that also help them, better align with the requirements of the market and things like that. So, no, in my view, smallholder farmers are not the problem when it comes to malnutrition, when it comes to, the issues of global hunger in this particular context. But
Okay.
One other thing that is important to note is markets are not necessarily homogeneous. For example, the case of Kenya, I think, our rate of hunger is about 3.5 million people, according to the IGAD, food security working group. But this is an issue of arbitrage. It's an issue of the food secure or food surplus areas vis-a-vis the food deficit areas and the transaction costs that are required to actually get produce, for example, from Kiambu to Wajir or to Kana. And I think that is an area where policy can better be applied to facilitate this transfer of food such that
Well, we'll finish up that point later on. You understand that technology sometimes you can have some freezes here and there. I think that's where Mannequin Challenge was born out of. But I want to bring in a different individual, Hamisi Williams, who is the Assistant Representative, Food and Agriculture Organization. And he joins us right now. Mr. Hamisi, when we talk about food security in Kenya, actually we have three challenges, three big challenges. One is COVID-19, everyone understands that. Another one is locusts, desert locusts in our country, and that has been terrorizing our farmers. Maybe from a FAO perspective, what is the progress in terms of dealing with this locust issue and enhancing our food security?
Thank you so much for having me. And I think this is the best show at the right time that we can advance some of these issues. But let me come straight to the point that you've asked about desert locusts. This has been advanced before. Remember, Kenya was facing the first invasion on 28th of December 2019 after a lull of about 70 years. What you heard then is that we really were not well prepared for this, because it was not now our everyday pest that we should have really been covering for. And immediately this came up, and plans were being made to do the control. In early 2020, COVID-19 happened. So I think I wanted to combine for you that again. It came with issues of lockdown. This also interfered with a number of activities and programs, plans we had for control. And this allowed swarms to be in our fields and lay eggs, and we experienced first generation, second generation, and going. But with the good coordination that the government had, supported by FAO and other resource partners, I think we swung into action, and we had very good plans. So largely we can say for the first invasion in Kenya, we were able to clear locusts out of our fields by July. August, September, we were barely free. Unfortunately, we had predictions that locust was still lingering in our neighboring countries, Ethiopia, Somalia, and also Yemen, which is a little bit far, but seems to be a really gateway for locusts into the Horn of Africa. And with these predictions, we started again on the plan to be now much better prepared. And fast forward is that for the second wave, which started coming in late November, it found us well prepared this time round. We had trained people, we had equipment here, we had the pesticides, and other related assets that are required, like spray planes. And I can tell you, for this second invasion, we've been on top of the game. And we are seeing that we are going to win this war even earlier if other factors remain constant.
Okay.
Yes, so this really is just in a nutshell of what we are doing with the control of desert locust.
Definitely.
And Kenya is doing much better now. We are really far ahead if I look at the other neighboring countries still, because we have very good coordination with the Ministry of Agriculture, and all the resource partners are really responding well, and the control is going on well here.
Okay. And shingles, Kevin, in terms of coming up with the global hunger index, you find that one of the most insecure, food insecure regions in the world, it's topped by two spaces, the sub-Saharan Africa and the south of Asia. In these factors that have been touched by Mr. Williams right there, matters to do with COVID-19 and also locusts. How much of an impact are these factors contributing towards our food insecurity based on the research that you did with GHI?
Yeah, thank you, Noah. And I think just to reflect very briefly on the other panellists, I think all of these issues are actually contributing to the insecurity of food here in Kenya. I mean, if we look at agriculture, we see a declining agricultural productivity, but we also know that 26% of the GDP here in Kenya is related to agriculture and to smallholder farmers. However, we also see a number of those smallholder farmers dropping out of that sector because of the high cost of inputs, due to the underinvestment of infrastructure, such as poor linkages to markets and poor access to those markets as well. And I think although we are improving on our figures from the year 2000 to date, Kenya has made significant improvements, but there's still a lot of work to be done to reach Zero Hunger 2030. And I think, as my colleagues have also mentioned, at the moment we have a triple crisis. We have not only the locusts, and we have to understand this is a second swarm of locusts, so there's been devastation already. And we also see that the COVID-19 situation, or the pandemic, that hasn't eased the situation as well. We see people in the urban slum areas or the informal settlements, some of them, up to 70% of them, are struggling to be food secure at their household level. So I definitely think there's a lot of work to be done. I think also, if we look at the statistics, around 23% of the population is undernourished. So they don't get the necessary calorie intake. We also see statistically, if we look at under fives, that we have 31.3% of children that are wasted. And that means that this is acute undernutrition and usually comes through the emergency phase. And we're having more and more of these emergencies. We're having climate having an effect where we have more frequency of drought, more frequency of flood, and now we have a conducive environment that is also stimulating the locust outbreak as well. Definitely. We also have a situation of stunting in this country, where 4.9% of children under 5 are actually stunted. And this looks at is pronounced here in Kenya and looks at the chronic situation. So this is a long-term effect of lack of adequate food. And we also see areas such as Kitui or West Pokot where child wasting is even higher. I think, finally, Noah, I'd like to reflect on the global acute malnutrition rates. On a global sense, 15% of global acute malnutrition equals an emergency. But we see pockets of Kenya, particularly in the Assal regions, where many under 5 are well beyond 15%. We see pockets of Turkana, host communities in Turkana West, that are beyond 23% of children who are wasted or malnourished. So, yeah. Although the situation has been improving, I think there's still a lot to be done, and a lot of policies that need to actually be reflected at county level and grassroots level.
Definitely. That is very important to know those statistics. And Professor Mary, you know, we were having some sort of, is it a joke that when we eat ugali, you know, our ugali is this big and our vegetables are this small. And people look at you and they say, now that is a true man. Whereas we should have more vegetables and a little bit of ugali. On a personal level, Professor, is it lack of information on a household level in terms of making sure that we are having sort of a balanced diet to improve on this issue of undernutrition, which is catastrophic right now?
Okay, thank you, Noah. We find that, as you have stated, there's been this belief that you eat more starch and less of the vegetables and fruits. But as it were, for you to be nutrient-rich, or the body to be filled with nutrients, you must have high quantities of what we call protective foods. These are mainly vegetables and fruits. So I think one of the ways in which we can help the public or the consumers in Kenya and beyond is to educate them and to pass knowledge to the people. I know there's this belief that vegetables are not good, they are for children, or for women, and so on. But I think many of us need to know that vegetables should be the best, actually, on your plate. And then you have a little ugali and a little meat or a little protein if it's beans, if you are a vegetarian like me. So you find that there is actually need for us, for the information we have, to educate all of us to know what does it entail to have a nutritious meal. I know, like in Kenya, people go for nyama choma. Too much nyama choma also is not good, but not just too much starch. So if you have to do nyama choma, please have a third nyama choma and 2/3 of it is managu. so that you are just having your nutrient enough, but the vegetables is the best for good nutrition, and then fruits come in, and then the others can supplement. So I think that we need to actually do a big campaign to all of us in the simplest way possible, that eat more vegetables, more managu, just the way we advertise Coca-Cola. Why can't we advertise Morenda? We advertise Sebebe, you talked about in Noah, and all this, and everybody will be eating them.
Yes, definitely. That is quite interesting. Actually, you've mentioned the issue of nyama choma, and you've touched a soft spot in my life. I won't debate, but that is a self-controlled discussion, because you have nyama choma and you have managu. But as you've mentioned, there needs to be that intentional and also informative basis that the vegetables actually provide more compared to nyama choma. So I ought to prioritize this. I think that's a very critical moment and a challenge thrown to Kenyans out there